Has the escalating tension between Israel and Iran exposed the US's difficult position in the Middle East? Let's delve into it. We're witnessing a rising tide of tension between Israel and Iran, two regional powerhouses. This simmering discord was recently brought to a boil with the aerial attack on Iran's consulate in Damascus. Although Israel has yet to officially claim responsibility for the attack, Iran has made it clear that it holds Israel accountable and has promised to retaliate. This isn't just a tit-for-tat exchange, it's a complex web of geopolitics with implications reaching far beyond the borders of Israel and Iran. The United States, for instance, finds itself in an unenviable predicament. As an ally of Israel, the US is under pressure to support its partner. However, any move that could be construed as an endorsement of what Iran perceives as aggression could further inflame the situation. This incident also throws a spotlight on the United States' role in the Middle East. Despite attempts to de-escalate the situation, the US finds itself caught in a precarious balancing act. On one side, it must maintain its unconditional support for Israel. On the other, it must work to prevent the conflict in Gaza from spiraling into a wider war. This tension underscores the challenges the US faces in its efforts to maintain peace and stability in the region. In the midst of this, President Joe Biden's administration finds itself under scrutiny. Analysts argue that the US should have swiftly condemned Israel's attack on Iran's consulate, citing it as a violation of international law and a threat to US forces in the region. Instead, they contend, the Biden administration has reinforced Israel's position by pledging continued support for Tel Aviv. This escalating tension not only threatens regional stability, but also reveals the US's challenging and contradictory position in the Middle East. The United States finds itself in an increasingly precarious position amidst these escalating tensions. Let's explore why. The United States is currently walking a tightrope between two seemingly contradictory foreign policy priorities. On one hand, there is the long-standing and unwavering support for Israel. This is a commitment that has been a cornerstone of the US's Middle East policy for decades. It's a bond that has been reinforced time and time again through various administrations, irrespective of party lines. On the other hand, there are the efforts to prevent the eruption of a wider conflict in Gaza. The US is well aware of the potentially devastating consequences of such a conflict, not just for the region, but for global stability as well. It's a delicate balancing act, one that the Biden administration is trying to navigate. However, this approach has been met with criticism. Trita Parsi, the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute, a think tank that encourages diplomacy over military action, has been vocal in his disapproval. He believes that the White House should have swiftly condemned Israel's alleged attack on Iran's embassy in Damascus, Syria, earlier this month. According to Parsi, this was not just a violation of international law, but also a danger to US troops in the region. Instead, the Biden administration chose to bolster Israel's position by pledging continued support. The US's stance, caught in the middle of these two conflicting priorities, is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The US, unlike some of its Western and Arab allies, did not condemn the attack on Iran's consulate, which reportedly resulted in 13 casualties, including 2 generals of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. At the same time, the US was quick to emphasize that it had no involvement in the incident. While calling for de-escalation, US officials continue to reiterate their rock-solid support for Israel, raising concerns about a direct confrontation between Washington and Tehran. This has essentially eliminated any incentive for Israel to de-escalate the situation, according to Parsi. It reinforces Israel's strategy of disregarding international law, knowing that they have the backing of the US regardless of the circumstances. The US's position, caught between two conflicting priorities, has been increasingly difficult to maintain. This escalating tension and the US's difficult position have significant implications. Let's examine them. The US is caught in a precarious balancing act. On one side, it has a staunch ally, Israel, and on the other, it faces a complex and adversarial relationship with Iran. This balancing act could strain the US's relations with its other allies in the region, particularly those that have historically been at odds with Israel. The US's position also has potential impacts on regional stability. The Middle East is a region that is already riddled with conflict and instability. The escalating tension between Israel and Iran and the US's involvement could further destabilize the region. This could lead to an increase in violence, displacement of people, and humanitarian crises. Moreover, there are significant implications for U.S. military personnel in the region. The U.S. has thousands of troops stationed in the Middle East. An escalation in conflicts could put these troops in harm's way. It's a scenario that the U.S. would want to avoid at all costs. Additionally, this situation could have economic repercussions. The Middle East is a key player in the global oil market. Any instability in the region can lead to fluctuations in oil prices, which can impact the global economy. This is something that the U.S., being one of the largest consumers of oil, would want to prevent. Furthermore, the U.S.'s position could impact its global standing. The U.S. has always portrayed itself as a champion of peace and stability. However, its current predicament could paint a different picture, one of a nation that supports one side in a conflict that could potentially escalate into a broader regional conflict. All these factors highlight the complexity of the U.S.'s position. The U.S. finds itself in a difficult situation, one that requires careful navigation to prevent further escalation of conflict, protect its interests, and maintain regional stability. The U.S.'s position is not only difficult but potentially dangerous, with significant implications for regional stability and U.S. interests. So what might the future hold for the U.S., Israel, and Iran in this volatile region? Let's consider some possible scenarios. Firstly, we could see a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. This is a scenario many fear, given the increased military activities and rhetoric from both nations. Iran's retaliation against Israeli attacks could spiral into a full-blown conflict, with both nations possessing formidable military capabilities. This could potentially draw in other regional and global powers, escalating the conflict even further. The second scenario could see a wider regional conflict. The Middle East is a geopolitical hotspot with a myriad of interconnected conflicts. The U.S.-Iran-Israel tension could spiral into a broader regional conflict, pulling in other nations such as Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Lebanon. This could lead to a complex, multi-front war with unpredictable outcomes. On the other hand, we could witness successful diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation. This would require careful negotiation and compromise from all parties involved, including the U.S., Israel, Iran, and other global powers. This scenario would involve the restoration of the Iran nuclear deal, with Iran agreeing to limit its nuclear program in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. This could lead to a decrease in regional tensions and a possible path towards stability. In all these scenarios, the roles of other countries could be pivotal. For instance, countries like Russia and China could play a key role in influencing Iran's actions, while European nations and the United Nations could apply diplomatic pressure to de-escalate the situation. Only time will tell what the future holds for the U.S., Israel, and Iran in the Middle East. Let's recap the main points we've discussed about the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran and the U.S.'s difficult position. The tensions between Israel and Iran are on the rise, with the U.S. caught in a challenging spot. An attack believed to be orchestrated by Israel on Iran's consulate in Damascus has sparked an intense reaction from Iran, who has vowed retaliation. This escalating situation exposes the limitations of the U.S.'s deterrence efforts in the Middle East. President Joe Biden's administration is under tremendous pressure, being stuck between two seemingly contradictory priorities: providing unconditional support to Israel and preventing a conflict in Gaza from escalating into a regional war. Biden's strategy, according to Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute, has been a disaster. Parsi believes the U.S. should have swiftly condemned Israel's attack on Iran's embassy area in Damascus, Syria earlier this month, which violated international law and posed a risk to U.S. troops in the region. Instead, the Biden administration strengthened Israel's position by pledging continued support. The U.S., unlike some of its Arab and Western allies, did not condemn the attack on Iran's consulate, which resulted in 13 deaths, including 2 generals of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. At the same time, the White House quickly emphasized that the U.S. was not involved in the incident. While calling for de-escalation, U.S. officials have reaffirmed their steadfast support for Israel, raising concerns about a direct confrontation between Washington and Tehran. "We are committed to protecting Israel. We will support Israel. We will help protect Israel, and Iran will not succeed," declared President Biden. Both the Pentagon and the State Department have echoed similar sentiments. Sina Tusi, a senior member at the Center for International Policy Research in Washington, describes the U.S.'s current policy towards the crisis as contradictory, and insincere. He notes that while the U.S. is urging restraint from all other parties in the region, it is encouraging Israel to act without fear of reprisal. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of a complex and evolving situation in the Middle East. Until next time.